Well, welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live here, and we are thrilled to be joined by one of the better writers that's out there who just has their hand in so many different things. Has their hand in the NHL with now writing for NBC Sports, has their hand very much in women's hockey in a big way, in a good way, for Sportsnet now. Also does a lot of work with Hockey East. It's Marisa Ingemi joining us. Hey, Marisa, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
We're good. Thank you very much for asking. I guess just got to play a little bit of a joke with you here, just only because what you're Sportsnet now, you're with NBC Sports now. How in the world do you not have a blue check mark yet?
Oh man, I don't know. I've been trying to get one for years now before I was anyone, and now like it's kind of ridiculous, but I don't know who to talk to, so maybe someday.
None of us know who to talk to. I saw reports that they were going to open verification back up in January. That hasn't happened yet. It's just, I feel like it's random and there's just no rhyme or reason to it.
Back at my old paper, I know the reason I didn't have one was the company that owned that paper was at war, was Twitter or something. Because I kept
Oh,
trying and they were like, oh no, they hate each other. So
no.
maybe I'm blacklisted. I don't know.
No, I don't see why you would be blacklisted. Maybe the paper, but considering who you're with now, I would think that that's almost automatic. But
Who's to
hopefully,
say?
who is to say? Hopefully, in time we'll get there. But
Someday.
that's the thing, Marissa, we want to really kind of focus in on is this pandemic, and especially trying to be a writer in a pandemic. And I know no matter who you are, no matter if you're a player, no matter if you're a member of the media, there's always adjustments. So what kinds of adjustments has it been for you in particular, trying to balance being both an NHL writer and covering the women's game like you do?
Well, the pandemic affected me in a big way in the sense I lost my job at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
So I was the Bruins writer at the Boston Herald. I was the last road trip I was on. I was in Buffalo for a game that never ended up happening. The night the NBA kind of shut down and kind of had a
Mm,
feeling, oh, this is going to be bad. And in less than a month, I didn't have a job anymore. So
mm,
for me personally, it's been pretty tough. It's been a little bit better the past few months, just being able to freelance a lot more. I freelanced a while ago before I had my job. So at least I was kind of used to it. But especially over the summer, it's difficult because if you're a sports writer, you kind of need some sports to be happening.
mhm.
And I mean, I'm in hockey predominantly, but I've also covered baseball, football, lacrosse, like
Yep.
kind of everything. And when there's nothing going on, like I've always prided myself and I can find a story out of anything and make it happen. And I've been able to do that, but it's a lot more difficult when either sports aren't happening or they shouldn't be happening or everything is getting canceled. And it's extremely difficult. I just feel really lucky right now. I'm able to write about stuff and taking it one day at a time.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your journey as well because, like you said, you've been through the depths and you have, I would think, would be one of your dream jobs to be able to cover the Boston Bruins like that. And then to have it kind of ripped away big time because of the pandemic. And there's a lot of people. I mean, you look at what's going on with Bell right now and
Mm-hmm.
everything with the rate. What advice do you have for those that might be facing a crunch like maybe the way that you did, and you're bouncing back very nicely, and I think it's well deserved. Just what do you have to say to those that want to try to kind of rebound?
It's tough because everyone's situation is a lot different, and a lot of people gave me advice I either didn't follow or didn't like. So I don't
Mhm.
want to pretend that I understand everyone's situation. But for me, something that drives me crazy is when people are like, "Oh, well, if it's so tough for you, why don't you just go do something else?"
Mm,
Um,
right.
anything like that, that drives me crazy. So I would say just like if you want to do it, just do it. There's
Yeah.
always opportunities. It's tough. Like prioritize yourself, your mental health, your well-being first. If it ever becomes dangerous or unsafe, or you just like can't financially feasibly do it anymore, then do what you need to do for you. But if it means a lot to you to stay in journalism, to stay in hockey and sports, whatever it may be that you're struggling in, just you're your best judge of who you are and what you want to do. So stick by that. No one else can get in your own head.
Absolutely. You can create your own path, and to go with what you want to do out there if you're looking for that idea. Um, Marissa, we're going to talk a lot about the NWHL and the bubble here, just because it was obviously a huge story, kind of from start to finish, and you did some fantastic reporting all the way through from the beginning to how the season ended. Just wanted to kind of get your sense of what kinds of things did you like about how the bubble worked? What kinds of things did you dislike about it? Just kind of walk us through kind of the beginning to end of how Lake Placid worked out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not finishing the season is pretty bad, but I think they made the right call in pulling the plug. It would have been a lot worse to continue and not like, I mean, a lot's been made about the lack of communication, and that's certainly been a problem that we've seen in a lot of different areas in the NWHL. But I think there should be a little bit of credit, at least for the transparency in canceling it and not just continuing to push forward, as we've seen some other leagues do. They at least got in front of it and prioritized safety. Like, not going to give them credit for too little too late, but at the same time, like it could have been a whole lot worse. So that's definitely a factor I'm going to mention, because I don't think I have yet. But yeah, I mean, obviously something went wrong. There was whether it be players not following the quarantine policies ahead of time, anyone out and about in Lake Placid. I wasn't there, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm just going by things that I've been told, but obviously something went wrong there. And there's a lot to address from there. I mean, as far as like good things, the exposure was wonderful. Obviously, the community around the NWHL is incredible. It's so different from so many other areas of sports, especially in men's sports. And you see how everyone came together on the Twitch chats and on Twitter and everything like that. And that's awesome. And definitely there's a foundation to build off of there. So I mean, I think we won't really know like how tough of a hit this was or how good it was for a little while, because we're going to have to see in the months to come, in the years to come, how do they build off this? How do they learn from this? Because it can go in one of two different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good segue to the next question I was going to ask, because you talked about Twitch, the community, and it seemed very well received when things were happening there. Just give everybody a sense who's maybe not as familiar with it. How popular was this idea? And then what kinds of things can we see, hopefully moving forward that can continue to grow the game?
Yeah, I mean, the NWHL has been on Twitch for a couple of years now, and it's been a really beneficial partnership for them to get all the games in. Especially this year, there was just the high-end nature of the graphics, the game presentation. The league's never had anything like that before. But what has been there is the community and the chat and things like that. So that's always kind of been at the core of what the NWHL audience is. And I think they do a really good job recognizing who that audience is and marketing for them, and just doing what they can to achieve that audience compared to reaching for something that might not ever be there. So that I think that's one of the keys going forward for the league, is continuing to identify who their audience is and what they want, and to present things for them. Don't try to go outside of what your own bubble is, not to use a pun, but don't go chasing after an audience you're never going to have or isn't going to show the same interest. There's already a core fan base there that's going to internally grow, especially on social media now. Like, leagues can be built on social media alone. We've seen that in the PLL now. I'm actually writing about that somewhere, how like they're just building this off of social media, especially during a pandemic too. It's really impressive. And the NWHL can go that way for sure, but they have to really stick to their guns and to what their identity really is. And I think the next few weeks and months, we're really going to learn about their dedication to doing that.
So that'll be their biggest priority then, right? I was going to ask you, what can we expect next from the league? So you think that will be the biggest priority, or is there something else that we should be watching for specifically for that league?
It's tough because with the way the season ended, like, I know there were plans in place for certain things, and I don't know where those are at now, because I mean, Commissioner Ty Taminia is calling it a success. I'm not sure it's viewed that way by everyone. And especially players who have now tested positive and have had their lives affected. So do those players return? What's up with Connecticut? Obviously, there was a breach of trust there. What's going to happen from here with them? Management in the front office of teams and in the league, I would expect there to be some people leaving. I would expect a change on the communications staff front. But I don't know what that looks like now. They're trying to say they want to finish the Isabel Cup, and I'm not sure how realistic that is. I know everyone I've talked to in the league who would be a part of that is more concerned about people healing and being healthy, and there are still people in Lake Placid quarantining. So I'm not sure how they can go forward with even thinking about that right now. But I'm just not sure until we have that, like that closure, that final conclusion officially or whatever. I'm not sure we're totally going to know what's going to happen as far as expansion plans, or when does next season start, or how. I mean, this is the second time now with this league that players, their trust has been totally breached and their safety compromised. So I don't know what happens from there. definitely it's not all doom and gloom. There's some positive to take out of the season. I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, it's all a failure, everything's terrible. There are obviously some gains, but those gains don't really mean anything unless they correct the wrongs that have been there.
Hmm. And I was going to ask you too about if you were specifically in a leadership position there. Obviously, a lot of change can happen. Like, what do you want to see implemented? I know you mentioned transparency earlier, but just what sorts of things should they prioritize, especially if you had that chance?
I think one of the things that needs to happen almost immediately is to have a full communication staff. As a reporter, I know it can be difficult sometimes. You're trying to find information, and they were just stretched so thin. I don't really put a lot of blame on them on that. They had a 2 or 3 person staff of people you can actually reach out to. Yeah. And it's not so easy, especially when you have untraditional media who don't follow some of the same guidelines, or you don't have some of the same expertise or experience. Sometimes it can be you're having different people from different backgrounds coming in asking different things that traditional sports leagues don't always have to answer or deal with. And we've seen the NWHL and women's sports in general held to a standard and different expectations that men's sports leagues just aren't. And that comes from predominantly women media, a lot of queer media, a lot of people of color in the media. And I think they just need a communication staff that's equipped to be able to deal with that. To be able to answer those questions and not be caught off guard or surprised, or just get out ahead of it before people are Twitter mobbing as they do, whether that's right or wrong. It's a thing that happens. So there just needs to be an effort there. And I believe until they completely fail at it, I believe they will take these steps to just be more transparent, be more accessible for people to listen. And I think those steps will happen. And I mean, that to me is number one thing. And then from there, obviously some things transpired in the league that caused some divisions between people in the front office, players, people involved. And there has to be some sort of unified, not message, but just a unified standard of everyone believes in the same type of thing. So they need to get their heads on about that. And once again, all indications are they will, but I don't think we really see any conclusion to anything like that until we know what's going to happen on the ice. And I would be betting on those games not happening, because I just don't see how. But until they say otherwise, I guess we have to believe it.
Absolutely. Until we hear otherwise. Marisa Ingemi joining us here from Sportsnet and NBC Sports, and the media. And I know that we're going to be talking to Dan Rice, somebody who's very familiar with the league and has covered it for a while. I just wonder your take on the overall state of the media covering the league. I know you have your hands in it. I know there's other outlets that are out there. The Ice Garden comes to mind. Here at the Hockey Writers, it's something we prioritize, but I feel like that there's always room for more. So just kind of give everybody a sense of just how is it covered? Do you feel like that they're doing a good job covering it? Just where does that all stand in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, like anything else in women's sports, a lot of the media covering women's sports don't have the same full-time opportunities. And a lot of the time it's just because it's women covering women. And most legacy media outlets or bigger outlets tend to ignore women's sports and also not hire women. So you're not really going to have people really advocating for that coverage. When I was at the Boston Herald, we had women's hockey coverage every single week. And since I've left, the women's hockey tab on their website has been deleted. So it's not really something you can rely on people to do on their own without bringing in those experts. So I gave Sportsnet a lot of credit. They brought me in because I was someone who's been around, and instead of having someone who's never covered it, not really know the ropes, they trusted me, and that means so much to me. And I'd love to see more of that. There are some reporters. I look at Matt Porter at the Boston Globe, who's been a colleague on the Bruins beat for me. He's done a tremendous job jumping into the NWHL. And that's because he's someone who, he sat next to me every Bruins game. So he had to hear me talk about it. So he knows women's hockey enough to jump in, and he's just a good reporter. And I'd like to see more men's hockey reporters make that kind of an effort. There isn't much of an incentive to without the demand. And there is a demand, and we're seeing it, but sports editors, especially older ones who maybe aren't used to women's hockey or women's sports in general being highlighted, have to make that adjustment, have to look at reaching an audience beyond the one they're accustomed to. And journalists do have a role in that too. And I would look at some of the more prominent reporters to jump in and do an educated, good job instead of just jumping into the drama, which we see happen sometimes. And I would also look at just hiring women or people like, you mentioned Dan Rice too, or Mike Murphy, like men who have
Yep.
been around women's hockey for a long time and done a tremendous job. Like, these resources are out there. There's people who have been in this league 5-6 years who have been covering women's hockey before the NWHL existed, who can just bring that expertise in. You don't have to train anyone. You don't have to really take up much time. Just pay people for their ability and their skill. And I think we're seeing somewhat of a movement towards that, and I hope it can be expedited. And maybe by season 7, we can have some of the people who have been around this league for a long time doing it for a bigger audience at a higher level, because everyone deserves it.
Well said. And, I'll take accountability too, because I'm in my 7th year. It's something that I have thought about. I've never gone full bore into it, and I know that there's a lot that I can learn about it. And I do sort of regret, because being here in Erie, Pennsylvania, Mercyhurst College. What's the first thing that many people think of Mercyhurst? They think, Megan Augusta. And there would have been an opportunity, back when, to maybe jump into it a little bit more. I went to Robert Morris. Brianne McLaughlin went to Robert Morris. I've actually had the chance to interview her. So I completely understand that, there's a lot of resources out there. Some of us can jump in. I hope that this is something, like you said, by season 7 or beyond. I think that we're starting to see some signs. Hopefully those signs continue to go in a positive direction so that they get the coverage that they deserve. But, the people that you mentioned, Mike Murphy's a big one. There's really, really good people out there that deserve the chance to be able to do something on a grander scale. So I definitely hope we see that.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to leave anyone out, but there's so many good women's hockey reporters worth following. You look at Erica Ayala, what she does, you look at everyone at the Ice Garden.
Yep.
Angelica Rodriguez is just doing tremendous work and deserves so much more credit for it. Hannah Beavis, which she's been doing forever now. There's just so many good reporters out there who deserve their work to be read. They deserve to be compensated and have notoriety for it, because it's a lot of tough work, and it's not as easy as showing up at the NHL rank. That's for sure.
That's definitely for sure. And those are the names, and there's many more out there. We need to amplify them. So if there's anything that we can do at this point, help amplify these people, get their names out there even more. We'll certainly do our part here to do that. Just kind of wanted to switch gears with you a little bit, as I know you wrote an article on NBC the other day with the big news about the Landro Twins, and obviously thinking back to the big moment that they had. Just give everybody a sense to just how big of news that was, and just the impact that they've personally had just on the women's game in general.
Yeah, you can argue. I don't think you can even argue. It's just true. The gold medal doesn't happen without them. Yeah. It just what they've done for women's hockey is incredible, and I think it's really kind of the first indicator of a changing of the guard for Team USA. We are in an Olympic cycle next year. Assuming with COVID, who's to say whatever happens ever again, but assuming we have a Winter Olympics next year, that roster is going to look kind of different. And obviously the Landro is not going to be there, but then you start to think, what's next? How much longer does Hillary Knight have, or Brianna Decker, or Amanda Kessel? Is this a last cycle, or is there another cycle to come? What does it start to look like? And then you start to look at, one of the things I wanted to write about was them in particular, the way they were talking about a grassroots effort for young players in Europe. They mentioned Alina Mueller on Northeastern, who I have the opportunity to watch play a lot and see how fantastic she is. And I just think women's hockey is in good hands. Just the talent we're going to see in North America and beyond the next 2 years is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. And the Landros are a part of that. They helped develop, obviously they were a part of the boycott with Team USA and demanding more resources and grassroots efforts. And we're seeing that all over the globe now for women's hockey. So definitely it's going to be sad we can't see them play anymore. But I think one thing they really talked about a lot was how just the game's in good hands, and it's going to continue to grow.
Very well said. Now, another thing too that has been coming out, I think the New York Rangers was one, the Toronto Maple Leafs as well, have announced some partnerships. So just for those that are not familiar, what can we expect to see there, and maybe how encouraging is it that a couple of teams have at least started to step up a little bit?
Yeah, in the NWHL bubble, we saw several teams buy cutouts, offer support to Bruins for tweeting about the Pride more than I've ever seen them do. So we're seeing positives all around. And Maple Leafs have a partnership with the PWHPA. The Rangers have gotten kind of involved with everything, which I think is really encouraging that they're not taking sides in anything. They're hosting the PWHPA, having cutouts for the Whale and the Riveters. I think that's just absolutely perfect to just support the sport uniformly. So I think that's really cool. So, I mean, the PWHPA in general is very interesting to see what direction they're going to go in from here. Their goal isn't to be its own entity, but to kind of bridge the gap between what they believe is a sustainable league for them. So hopefully we continue to see that grow as well and see them just continue to garner those resources. They have some good partnerships in general, some good sponsorships like Secret in Canada, but I would really like to see a lot more information about player compensation, especially playing during a pandemic, like how those players will be rewarded for that. Like we see them playing in the USPHL in Tampa right now. I'd love to know more information, have more accessible broadcasts. So hopefully that can continue to grow as well, and we can continue to learn about the PWHPA's mission.
Absolutely. And just got a couple more for you here. I know can't let you go without asking at least one Boston Bruins question. This, I don't know about it and how anybody else has been feeling, but with the way that the divisions are aligned, I've been living in the central. I think people in Canada have been living in the north and stuff like that. So it's been kind of tough unless you watch like in center ice or NHL TV to kind of keep track of everything. But it seems like the Boston Bruins are doing Boston Bruins things, and that's even without Zdeno Chara. And at least from the outside, I thought defense might be a little bit of a question, especially with his departure. And it seems like they have not missed a beat. So Marisa, question for you about the Bruins. What is it about them that they're just able to continue on the way that they have been, just consistently winning, consistently being good, even when they lose good players like that?
I think on defense, at least, the biggest thing has been Charlie McAvoy is just playing the best hockey of his life. And I think part of that is he's freed more offensively by playing with Jeremy Lauzon, who's a young defenseman who, like, very defensive oriented, penalty kill guy, won't score probably, but it really allows room. Like I kind of thought, I think everyone did that Grizzlick and McAvoy would be paired up because they have good numbers together, but Lauzon being there just frees McAvoy a little bit more. And I wrote about this the other day for NBC. What's impressive about him is, well, they're having him take a lot more offensive zone faceoffs, and that's definitely contributed to his offense. There was a game a couple games ago where he took only 29% of his faceoffs in the offensive end and was still on the ice for 12 shots, 4 and 3 against. Like that's incredible. So he's just playing at another level, and I think that's really carried the defense. Also, Brandon Carlo is just solid as always. So that's a big contributing factor. On offense, it's just kind of wild because they were without Pasternak for a while, and we've seen how good he is and how well he's playing since he came back. But like the Nick Ritchie show has been in town, just like absolutely kind of wild to see stuff like that happening. And I think there's just a cohesiveness there. And they're not clicking on all cylinders either. Like Jake DeBrusk hasn't broken out yet. Coyle's starting to get some inconsistency on his wing. Andre Kashi's been out. Like we don't fully know their ceiling yet, but I do know David Pasternak being back is huge for them.
Man, just how many teams could wish they could have a do-over with Pasternak? I mean, just it landed on Boston's lap, and they've enjoyed every minute of that ride. So, Marisa, we're going to end with just one final fun question for you. You know, being the Boston expert, and I know I've been up there a couple of times. Actually, used to live in New Hampshire, so I know a little bit about it. But is it true that if you go through Boston, is there a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner of the city of Boston?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I live right by Boston University, and I have 4 Dunkins within a mile I can go to. I go to the one right next to my building, but yeah, pretty much wherever you can rely on that.
So something's brewing up there, huh? We're brewing
the Boston
up there.
Bruin.
That's it. Well, listen, fans, Marisa is literally one of the best follows you can have out there. Has her hands in so many things, especially with the women's game, especially with being at NBC now. Fantastic interview, Marisa. We really appreciate you taking the time to get us caught up, especially with what happened in Lake Placid and what we can expect next. So thank you for this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much.
And fans, you know, just make sure that you hit that like button. Make sure that you hit subscribe on YouTube. You will not miss any of these interviews. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Hockey Writers Live. Hope you have a good night, and we will see you next time.